have it. And I'm also going to say I'm friends with Scott and Kevin. Okay, so I don't want to say anything that stirs up that doesn't need to be stirred up. However, I will tell you that I disagree with that narrative that's out there, that because of the fake Diesel and fake Scott Hall, that somehow that made me go into a panic and I decided to offer them more money. It's a very interesting story to tell. I ain't buying it. That angle in WWE, in fact, I did a debate with Bruce Pritchard. I don't know if any of you or how many of you know who Bruce is, but at the time, I know Bruce is a close friend. He's one of my closest friends, so I don't mean that. But, you know, I don't know how much you guys know about
What was that laugh about Bruce Pritchard? I don't get it.
He's a good man. He's one of the best people I've come to be friends with in the wrestling business. But at the time, Bruce was Vince's right-hand man. He was in every meeting. He was in every creative decision. He was a part of everything that went on. He was a confidant to Vince McMahon. And Bruce Pritchard will tell the story if you ever get a chance to bring him here. Ask him that same question. And he'll tell you that that was an idea that was created by an attorney called Jerry McDivitt, who, by the way, I spent a lot of time sitting across a table from in federal lawsuits and trademark depositions. So I got to know him kind of well, unfortunately. It didn't turn out good. But the idea was created by Jerry McDivitt for no other reason to establish to the court and to support their lawsuit that since they owned the character of Diesel and Razor Ramon, that they could still use them however they wanted to, and for us to infringe upon that character added value to their lawsuit position. That's where that idea came from. And no, I did not offer anybody more money for it. Ted Turner and I looked at that, and there was other people in the room. It wasn't just Ted and I, but we looked at that videotape and laughed our asses off. Nobody panicked. So I don't know how that story got started, and I'm sure in some people's minds it may have been true. Some people convinced themselves of things that wasn't true, but in their minds is. I don't know. I can only tell you how I felt at that time, and I didn't write any checks because of it. As I alluded to early when we first started this thing, when you're a talent, you're driven differently than the average person. And I've worked in factories. I've almost had, I can almost say I've had a job beginning with every letter in the alphabet. I haven't worked at a zoo yet. I might knock that one off before I'm done, just to finish stuff out. The Q, I can't figure that one out. There's a couple other letters, but just about I've had a lot of different jobs in my life. But the one thing I will say, because I've done a lot of stuff, from digging ditches, I've done that. When you're talent, you're driven a little differently than the average person, and sometimes you're a little different to get along with. Some of it is a sense of insecurity, especially in the wrestling business, especially back in the 80s, or 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. It was a very, very competitive business, and nobody was really supporting each other because everybody wanted everybody else's position. Everybody wanted to advance themselves because that was the nature of the business at that time. That was the culture. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just the way it was. So because of that, there were times when a lot of guys were hard to get along with, and I can't pinpoint which one was the hardest, to be very honest with you. I know you'd like to hear that because people like that kind of stuff, and like to tweet it and read about it. And I know it's not exciting to hear, but I'm not going to lie to you. It was the truth to me. There were times when I wanted to, Kevin Nash and I would, it wouldn't get physical because I wouldn't be sitting here tonight if it did. But there were times when I was confident that it was going to go that way, and I was prepared for it to go that way. He was horrible, but he was also at sometimes my closest confidant, because I recognized that you get the good with the challenging. There were times when Bill Goldberg made me want to chew my own leg off and beat myself with it. But that doesn't mean he was a bad person. It just means he was doing what he thought was best for him at that time. And he was a very passionate, driven person.
What kind of stuff was it over?
Almost always creative. It was creative, almost creative, and money always went hand in hand. Because talent was smart, they knew the better they were positioned storyline-wise, the more dependent we were upon them because of a story, the more committed we were to them because of where we were going in the long run, the more leverage they had. And much like, the story with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and the fake Diesel and fake Ramon, the truth is we may have been negotiating with them at that time. And I may have given them more money. But it's not because of that. Those guys never made, I'm not going to talk about really too often how much money people made because in most cases, I don't freaking remember, number one. I had 140 guys working for me under contract at one time. I didn't write the contracts myself, so I can't remember exactly. But in general, I will tell you that very few people made more than $1.5 million. I mean, a small handful. And a lot of those guys came in making 600, 700. Scott and Kevin came in making somewhere probably around 750,000 a year. Because Sting was my highest paid guy at the time, and I couldn't afford to pay guys a lot more than him. So the bar was set, no matter how good somebody was. Hulk Hogan was the exception to that. But usually the arguments it was a nexus of creative discussion with the idea in mind that there was a financial commitment involved.